Thank you very much. So yes, my name is Tim Hall, and I work in the Online Education Directorate in the Product Innovation team. Jonathan, do you want to give us a quick?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jonathon. I'm also working in the Online Education Directorate here at Worldwide.
So we're going to talk a bit about today about an AI teaching assistant pilot that we ran and are currently running since last year. We spoke a bit about this at RISE last year to talk about kind of our expectations, what our hopes for the pilot might be, and we promised to come back and tell you a bit about kind of how that went. So this is us. This is why we're here. For those of you who weren't here last year, we'll do kind of a brief introduction about kind of what the tool is. What kind of what encouraged us to kind of explore it. And then we can talk a bit about some of the outcomes, some of the insights that we've gained, some of the challenges we've faced, and some of the things that we're going to be thinking about when it comes to implementing AI more broadly across the university. So the name Londy was used for our undergraduate laws students to define this tool. Initially, sort of the organisation that we worked with, Noodle Factory, it was called Water Out of the Box, and there was a bit of discussion about not wanting to necessarily give it a human name, but something that students could reference rather than this general chatbot. Now, there's a lot of work that's gone into the running of this pilot. So just on the forefront, Jonathon and I here. In fact, we've got a couple of colleagues who have helped with this in the audience as well. So you can see we've got colleagues from undergraduate laws, postgraduate laws, our student voice group contributed. We've got colleagues from Code, let's go over there, Catherine, and then Jonathan and I. I'm afraid Joe's face is kind of missed, but Joe is around as well today, so say hi to her as well. So a bit of an introduction. So the AI teaching assistant, or what we sort of initially called the AI tutor, which then moved to study buddy. Again, this is kind of reflective of our understanding of how the tool would work. Why do we want to pilot it? I think Jonathon had spoken in the last session about this. Is there a student interest in these tools? Are there any, to use a word that was kind of a bit controversial earlier this morning, are there any efficiencies that could be found with the use of this tool? Could we find more personalization from the point of view of students? Could these provide any further insights for us as far as kind of innovation of these tools? Now, we went into a bit more detail in the previous session around some of the kind of academic justification for this as well, and there's quite a famous 2 sigma problem by Benjamin Bloom. The problem that he was aiming to solve was kind of a really practical one, which is how could educators provide every student with a type of personalised instruction that led to mastery of the subject. Now, the result of that essentially was that it couldn't be done at the time. There was no kind of practical way to do that. And similar with us now, we could not recruit 40,000+ tutors to look after students because it would break our business model essentially. Now, I've spoken a bit about the collaboration with Noodle Factory. They're an organisation at the time who are very much at the forefront of providing these sorts of chatbots in an academic setting. And again, I suppose this is kind of coupled with what I was saying about personalised instruction and independent learning, where we can find, especially in the context of the University of London. So for those of you who are not aware, the University of London, especially our part, is focused very much on distance learning, and we've got a lot of students who are independent learners. So this is very much not a kind of replacement, but something that's kind of in addition to what they receive. So the pilot objectives, I think, we were, again, sort of a little bit in the dark when we were first running the pilot, in the sense that we knew that there were a lot of unknowns, I suppose, to kind of raise. And I think for us, it was really about kind of evaluating the impact of what this tool might have on our students who were part of the pilot, trying to identify any kind of potential benefits of the use of AI technology in enhancing student support, student engagement, and how that might influence our kind of long-term thinking around the use of AI tools as well. And also specifically to assess the quality of this study buddy. So, in this instance, we're talking about Noodle Factory and how much value it brings to the learning experience. So briefly, kind of how the tool works. This is just a bit of a video just showing kind of how an academic might use it. So the program teams or academics can drag and drop textbooks, lesson plans, course notes, question banks, video transcripts, lots of other relevant courses into the content, and then it generates a knowledge base out of that. And then responses to students' chats, quiz questions are generated from that knowledge base. Educators can also extract stats from student usage of the tool. So what you're seeing here is a student ask a question and can give a long answer. This is all based on the material that's been provided to it, so it's not falling back to ChatGPT, which is a choice. You know, we can do that, but we were very much keen to see how it could perform just using the material that we were providing, so the academic content that we were providing. And then really, hoping that this would provide some opportunity for students to improve their learning. So as far as kind of the outcomes, this is kind of what we were hoping for, and some of the things we've produced. So we've done a number of pilot surveys throughout the project. Oscar led code interviews, so this was interviewing members of staff, students, academics on the activity itself. Kind of monitored the activity throughout the process, getting stakeholder feedback consistently, talking to those who are using it, speaking to the student voice group, looking at the feedback that was provided through the tool itself. We're hoping that at the end of this, we're going to be able to kind of look at the assessment results for these students and try and gauge whether or not there was any influence on the assessment results versus those who weren't using the tool. Obviously, there's limitations on how much we can do that, because there's also other things that kind of influence these things. But out of interest, I think we're kind of interested in seeing that. Building more institutional awareness. So we did a lot of kind of outreach exercises. We spoke to students, academics, other stakeholders across the Federation to talk about the ways in which we're using this tool and the ways in which the tool might be used in the future. And I mean, as a result as well, we had some sector influence. So we've been kind of not lobbying, but encouraging just in these AI copyright working groups to really focus on some of the challenges that we had with working with publishers on making sure that they were happy with the kind of content that they were allowing us to put onto these tools. And my feeling is that we'll talk a bit more about insights later on, but my feeling is very much that this is going to be a bigger kind of conversation happening more across the sector. And the other thing we're really pleased to win is a Gartner Iron Innovation Award, which I wasn't expecting, but we were really happy they did. And I think the response we got back from them was that they were really pleased to see us kind of taking an active role in piloting these tools, experimenting, and just gaining insight. And so that was a really nice thing to kind of finish off the end of last year. So there's a bit more about kind of some of the stakeholder engagement. So we've been doing blog posts, we've taken part in external events, online and in person. We've run webinars and in-person workshops and labs on the use of AI tools, of AI chatbots in learning, and also more specifically, this was a lab on chat-based learning, so the pedagogy around chat-based learning itself, which was really interesting. So obviously that has potential, important combinations with tools themselves. So these are the numbers as of a couple of days ago. So we've seen a big increase in the number of people engaging with it. So we've had 1,171 unique users. The average score has gone down. So last year it was 4, and now it's 3.6. Now, some of the feedback we've had from students is around kind of, I think, a bit about change in their expectations of what kind of chatbots can do. Because obviously over the last kind of 18 months, we've seen this huge boom in generative AI and all the hype around it, you know, and these kind of threats that it's going to destroy the world and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, I think the expectation of students, well, it should be able to answer my question then if it's threatening to do that. So you know, I'm not suggesting that is the only reason, but I think, you know, that's an interesting thing to kind of notice. Unique active users today, on average around 8, and on average 9 questions for those who engaged in the chat sessions. This gives you a bit of a diagram of the use over time. Can anyone guess when exams are taking place? So this for me is really interesting because I think it doesn't necessarily demonstrate that the tool has been useful for students. You know, I'm not going to suggest that, but what I am saying is that clearly at a point in time, students felt as though they needed more support, and they were relying on what they had available to them. And one of those things was the study buddy. So, you know, and post exams, you know, they've done them well, just flatlining, and then you kind of see the engagement are grading up again. So I think again that's really interesting just to be able to see that from one graph. So we did. So this is a bit of an analysis of some of the survey responses we had to our pilot surveys. Generally speaking, the responses from the students have been quite positive. I think it's quite interesting, some of the discussion that happened this morning around the skepticism amongst students about how useful this is going to be. Mostly quite enthusiastic about the prospect of AI kind of supporting their learning. And I think this is kind of reflected in some of the work that Oscar's done as well. There is kind of consistently this, I really like it, but please don't get rid of all of the humans. You know, like we feel like humans are a really important part of our learning experience. So, you know, it's not a replacement. Like it's really good that this is something that, you know, we can take advantage of, and the fact that, you know, it's available 24/7 is really useful. One of the examples, one of the student voice group gave us the last time, which I mentioned when I presented, was the idea that, you know, just getting a response immediately is really valuable, because it might just be you just need some clarification, and having to wait a day to get that clarification versus having to get it straight away is actually like really, you know, again, really positive. Oscar's done some really good work on interviewing. So I really wanted to just sort of champion the fact that you've done that, Oscar. I think what was interesting, again, from those conversations, I think you're going to present at some point in the future about this. So I don't want to nick all of your work. But what I think was really good in reading through some of the responses from students is, again, very much more nuanced, much more informed about the tools. And you know, these weren't necessarily students from the UK. I think one was Trinidad and Tobago. Where was the other? One was UK. But both of them had kind of similar views, which was, you know, they very much like the idea of the tool being able to enhance their learning. They found it useful when they did use it, but you know, they're keen to have that human interaction as well where possible. So I think some of the insights from our activity was that the functionality definitely requires work. So, you know, I think some of the tools now that are available are doing some quite interesting things. But I think for us, it's just making sure that, you know, rather than sort of covering the students with all of this different kind of functionality, really focusing on the stuff that is impactful for them. So there's lots more functionality available within Noodle Factory that we could potentially take advantage of going forward. But I think the other thing that Noodle Factory were kind of keen to say to us was that it might save academic time. But when we were looking at the tools, when it comes to kind of curated pathways, when it comes to generating stuff outside of the knowledge base, that's additional work for the academics when it comes down to it. Now, obviously, in a more traditional setting, it might be that those academics are saving time answering inquiries so they can spend time doing that stuff. But where we are, you know, that's not the case. So I think, you know, everyone's going to get, you know, your mileage no area, I guess, from that. We were really pleased about the positive feedback from the participants. So, you know, I'll see if I can get my my stats up, because I do have some notes, but the notes aren't showing there. So I might come back to them after Jonathan's done his presentation, just so I can kind of speak to them a bit more effectively. The ethical and privacy concerns, again, that was something that the students highlighted, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of been discussed today. I think, you know, one of the things that the students said was positive was around the fact that they all had access to it, and I think that's kind of should probably be an approach for universities. You know, I think we've got colleagues in SAS who did a really good presentation on the difference between somebody who is using the generative AI and somebody who doesn't have access to it, taking the same course. And I think, you know, if universities have some space to provide some tool, you know, whether it's not necessarily kind of the premium version of ChatGPT, but at least something that the students might want to, you know, lean on to support them, then if we can do that in as equitable way as possible, then that'd be really positive. I've mentioned this already, but challenges negotiating with publishers. So, you know, I think we need some really important work to be done with colleagues in library. So, people I didn't mention actually at the beginning of the slides, which I apologise for, are our colleagues in the online library. So they've been really good in explaining to us sort of the challenges in negotiating contracts with publishers around kind of the use of tools. And you can imagine, you know, when all of this kicked off around use of generative AI, publishers were very concerned, because obviously it has potential, it could have a real impact on their business model. And we've seen publishers taking different approaches to this. So some have been a bit more engaged with those who might want to use generative AI. Some are saying absolutely not, don't go anywhere near our material. Some are saying we're going to build our own chatbots that we're going to want the students to engage with. And so again, you know, I think this is not something that we're going to necessarily be able to steer through this one pilot, but I think it's probably worth everyone taking away from this, that this is probably going to be a conversation that's happening within institutions at some level or another. The desire for human element in education, I think, you know, that was another thing that kind of came across quite clearly from our students, saying, you know, this is all well and good, but, you know, please don't replace people. Not that that was our intention for the pilot. The next thing is around pedagogical integration. I think, you know, so there's some really interesting work that's gone on for, you know, decades around kind of chat-based learning. We see some, you know, the kind of the edge innovators with the Khan Academy, with Khan Migo, which is very much embedding the chatbot within the learning material. So rather than it just being something supplementary to the content, it's actually there embedded within the content. So it's kind of leading students through that conversation and then being able to kind of adapt based on the students' understanding of the content as well. And then the other thing, I suppose, for us, as far as kind of more practical thoughts, is around the space becoming more competitive. So when Jonathon, you know, found Noodle Factory, you know, when was the first time you spoke to them? Yeah. So they were very much, you know, emerging as the kind of leader in the market. But there's an absolutely huge amount of organisations that are offering comparable services with slightly different approaches. Some much more focused on assessment, so, you know, supporting academics in marking hundreds of papers. Others more focused on connecting the discussion that students having with the chatbot with their learning outcomes already. So sort of saying, okay, with the students here, this is the level in which we need to engage with them. So I think for us, that's been really interesting. So I'll hand it to Jonathon while I find some more of my notes that I can kind of push on.
Thank you. So if anyone's ever been to a presentation before, you will know that I tend to ignore everything that's on the screen. A little bit closer. A little bit closer, yes. It's okay? I can see the camera. Yeah, see my ball patch up there. So I tend to ignore most of the stuff that's going on here. I almost certainly ignore my notes. Today I'm going to ignore the title that Tim gave me as well. I'm just going to go one step further. So this is really, I mean, the title's around global trends in chatbots, chat-based learning. As I was thinking about this when I did it, you know, it sort of incorporates. Yeah, so this, you know, I couldn't help but sort of, as I was thinking about this, think about AI and, you know, machine learning and all these tools generally. I wasn't really just narrowing it down just to the chatbot. So sort of, and also a lot of this is rather than trends, a lot of this is actually kind of what I think might happen, what I expect to happen, also maybe what I'd like to see happening as well. So just a bit of a disclaimer there. The first trend is, you know, it's growing, obviously, this chat-based learning. It's growing in particularly in things like language learning. But and alongside that, it's definitely, you know, where we're seeing significant growth now is in the chat-based around administrative and professional service tasks as well. And one of the big growth areas is student inquiries and inquiry handling through the chat-based side of things, and not just student inquiries. You'll see there are lots of businesses out there now where their whole support is AI driven. There aren't people in there. You know, that's a massive growth area. Integration with existing platforms, you know, at the moment, in our instance, you are linking out to a separate piece of software. You will see in time this integrated into your standard messaging. You know, it'll be integrated into WhatsApp, Slack, all these tools you learn. You know, that's a good thing. It will reduce the barriers to entry, reduce the learning curves, etc., encouraging wider participation. And, you know, integrated into your mobile devices, it'll be everywhere. Advances in natural language processing. So, was anybody at Digifest? I've just come back from Digifest. So if not, well, one of the key takeaways of one of the key talks there was, you know, predicting what's the future of AI, what's it going to be in 2030, you know, setting that parameter. And one of the big things they said is AI will be invisible. You know, by that time it'll be invisible. You won't know. Now you can cut and paste a piece of ChatGPT generated content into platforms, and it will tell you it's generated by ChatGPT. And, you know, you push the other button, it'll rewrite it, so it can't be generated, checked. But, you know, it'll be invisible. In a few years' time, NLP will advance, and you know that you know, so that your dialogues and conversations that you are having, and I'm using conversations, so I know it's not technically a conversation, but they will be indistinguishable from humans. And it starts to get, I don't want to get sort of too deep into the sort of psychology of all this and the morality of all this, but from a student's perspective, if they're getting good responses that answer their problems from a non-human, does it matter? And I think that is the question we have to ask ourselves, is does it matter? They don't care. And you know, they just want to know an answer. They want an admin query answer. Does it matter if they are getting what they want from non-humans? And that's the challenge to humans, really. But you'll see that growth. Accessibility. Now, this is an interesting one, because think about distance learning. Think about, we used to say text. Text was great. It's very accessible to, from a technological perspective. We've moved online now. It's video. It's very bandwidth heavy. It's very visual. So people with visual impairment struggle. So you can, it's very interactive. You can push buttons, do things. So people, who aren't able to do that can struggle. Chat-based and learning and these things, suddenly text becomes very, very powerful again. You can have a piece of text, you can have a PDF, you can have a Word document, you can have a text file that suddenly people can now interact with, and it lowers those barriers to entry. Those technical barriers come down. You think you can have a dialogue with a simple plain text document. You could provide a fantastic learning experience for students with a PDF and a personal tutor, and that's very low technology. So in terms of accessibility, it's quite an interesting area. I think that's we've not yet. So I'll give you an example about this. At Digifest, there was an academic there who had someone who was a student who's profoundly deaf since birth, only spoke one language, and that was sign language. When he's engaging with this, with sign language, how you construct sentences in sign language is very different. You use a lot fewer words. They could type into the chatbot in the way they construct sentences, and the chatbot could understand it clearly. And from their point of view, apparently the lecturer was saying their marks went significantly up with this software because it could actually have conversation in its own language, which was unrestricted before, because it's a visual form of communication rather than spoken. Now, personalization, adaptive learning, this is where I think things get really, really interesting with chat-based learning. So imagine you have a text file. or you watch a video, you watch a lecture, you have some knowledge communicated to you you don't understand, okay? But you you're not sure you understand it, you want confirmation. So with this chat-based learning, you can do this with ChatGPT now. You can say, I didn't understand that, explain it in a different way. Oh, I still don't understand it. Give it to me in bite-sized bullets. No, I still don't understand it. Give it to me as a metaphor. Give it to me as a story. Okay, now place it in, explain that, put it into a real-world example. Put it into my real world. I'm an accountant. Put it into an accounting perspective. I'm an architect. Generate a case. Okay, right, I finally get it. I get it. Right, let's move on. That's personalized learning. It's not letting algorithms make decisions for you. You're making decisions. You can do that now. This is where your text file becomes so powerful. You can't go to lectures. I don't understand it. Well, you could, but not everyone could. The lecturer can't think that fast a lot of the time. Now, the risk, of course, as we all know, who knows what AI is telling you? But things will improve. I just think that is so powerful that you can just get it to re-explain it in different ways, different contexts that are properly personalized to you. You're not making, let's say, the algorithms make the decision when you move on, you are. I don't think that's such a sort of interesting, exciting area. Lastly, global reach, local adaptations. We, of course, here a guy earlier on talked about, to do that, you can have that global reach there, but you can adapt it locally. You can have to start to have conversations in your natural language. I just think I talked about the person, the deaf person earlier on. Their natural language is visual. But you can have it in your natural language. You don't have to translate mentally. You can still maybe write your essay if it's like for worldwide, for instance, as English is a first language kind of thing. But I just think the scope there is enormous. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Okay, moving on. So these are some of the things we've got to talk about as we move out of pilot into policy. Data protection, privacy. I don't think there's anything specifically different on that. I don't need to go into detail. I think the data protection policies are there. I think this just gets into it. Ring fencing the data you put in to not train the large language model is probably the only difference you need to make. Now, ethical considerations are much more complex. Bias, fairness, we know AI is biased. We know that. We also have the consideration of, as alluded to earlier on, about how AI is trained and some the sort of exploitative practices that went on there. So these are ethical considerations. We need to think about transparency and accountability. Who's responsible for a decision that AI makes on behalf of the user? Is everything the user's problem? Who's responsible for an error that AI tells the user? Is that the user's, because I don't know the answers to many of these questions, by the way. I'm just saying these are considerations we'd have to think through very carefully if we were going to start to roll this out more widely. Academic integrity, we know misuse, authorship, originality. These are things you'd have to deal with anyway. AI is not particularly it's going to create more opportunity for issues, but it's not. I don't know to what extent the issue is going to be any different. But the usual things. How do you contribute and acknowledge AI generated work? But you'd have to align all this, adhere an alignment to existing plagiarism standards. Technical and operational considerations. Again, you need support. You need people to look after it, etc. Again, that's fairly standard to any piece of software. I don't think that's different. Pedagogical implications, more challenging, but again, how does it change teaching practices? Defining the role and limitations of AI and things like that. You'd have to factor all this into sort of policy decisions you're making, managers' students' expectations to say. Regulatory compliance, alignment to accessibility standards and things like that would have to be factored in. Financial consideration, return on investment, equality. So someone's got to pay for all this. So what are your justifications for using it? You're going to have to think. You have to think about how to measure efficacy, impact. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to are you measuring attainment improvement? Are you measuring retention? Are you measuring progression? Is it available to all students? It's on the equality issue. And then, evaluation, how do we assess the impacts on all this? How do we assess user satisfaction? And what feedback mechanisms are we going to use to inform ongoing improvements? I think they're the sort of big policy kind of decisions we'd have to consider.
So just going back to a couple of the points we raised, because I've got some notes up here. So we did survey the students as part of this activity, and we will do again at the end of the assessment. Sorry, at the end of the pilot. But on the face of things, along with the kind of review of the students' responses, 78 respondents agreed or strongly agreed that an AI study buddy's responses were helpful. 73% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that the AI study buddy has helped to improve their academic performance. 84% agreed strongly that the AI study buddy improved their learning experience. And 87% of respondents said they would probably or definitely recommend the AI study buddy to peers or colleagues. So more kind of explicitly, just I wanted to kind of take a line from one of the interviews that Oscar had done around that. Martha, who was a law student in her 40s, said that she found the tutor to be a valuable asset in unpacking complex topics, praising its ability to simplify explanations and assist with exam preparations, which I thought was a really good validation for that. More on the kind of insights, because there's a couple of things that I've missed, but I think there is a real critical need for kind of thoughtful integration of AI tools as and when we do want to use them. I think I'll pick out a comment from one of the students who, because we also asked for those who didn't use it, why didn't you use it? And one of the comments from the students was, I experimented with ChatGPT and I found it to be not much good. For all its flaws, however, it remains the gold standard, making this less interesting to me. So that just demonstrates like the students are kind of using these tools out there and find them. Some will always kind of fall back to the tools that are available to them. The couple of really brief things, I know we've got a minute left, but I think the literacy work is a really important one. So we have produced AI briefings for students and advice for students on how to use it, on what we think is appropriate use, on some of the ethical implications of the use of AI, and give them a bit of an understanding of what it does well and what it doesn't do well. And I think that's really important, not just handing these tools over there. And I think also just more generally, the idea of kind of prompt engineering versus problem formulation and really encouraging students to engage critically with the tools they're using. And, I think that is a transferable skill. People that have got good critical thinking, I think will be able to make good decisions about using this technology in the future. Thanks very much.